Democracies don't usually die in silence. They die in confusion. Last week in Caracas, a president was arrested. Soldiers moved in. Power changed hands. Many called it liberation. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Removing a dictator does not create democracy. Sometimes it only creates a vacuum. Nicolás Maduro is gone. Yet Venezuela still does not know who truly rules. María Corina Machado says the people already decided. She says the vote was clear. She says legitimacy belongs to the opposition. Washington helped remove the strongman, but it did not hand power to the winner of the election. This is the paradox of modern intervention. Force can end a regime. It cannot manufacture trust. I have seen this pattern before in different countries, in different decades, and it almost always ends the same way. If you want to understand how revolutions lose their promise and why power so often betrays democracy, stay with me. Because Venezuela's story did not begin last week, and it will not end there. What is happening in Venezuela is not a simple transfer of power. It is a collision of three claims to authority. First, there is electoral legitimacy. The opposition says it won the 2024 vote. Vote tallies support that claim. Dozens of countries recognize that result. Second, there is institutional control. The courts, the security forces, the ministries, most of them never left the old system. And third, there is external force. The United States removed Nicolás Maduro. It chose speed over consensus, stability over symbolism. These three forces rarely align, and when they don't, countries drift. This is why María Corina Machado's demand matters. She is not just asking for power. She is asking for recognition of a mandate. But mandates do not govern by themselves. They need institutions to obey them. They need armies to respect them. They need outsiders to stop improvising. Venezuela now sits in that fragile gap between what people voted for and what power allows. To understand why this gap exists, we have to go back, not days, but decades. Venezuela's crisis did not begin with Nicolás Maduro. And it did not begin with this intervention. It began with a bargain. Years ago, oil money replaced institutions. When prices were high, the system worked. The state spent, the people complied. Democracy slowly hollowed out. Power concentrated. Checks disappeared. Loyalty mattered more than competence. Then the oil cycle turned. Revenue collapsed. Inflation exploded. The social contract broke. To survive, the regime changed its logic. It no longer governed through consent. It governed through control. Elections became rituals. Courts became shields. The military became the final guarantor of power. This is the mechanism many miss. Authoritarian systems do not fall all at once. They adapt. By the time the 2024 election arrived, the outcome mattered less than the machinery behind it. So when the opposition claimed victory, they collided with a system built to ignore loss. And when that system finally cracked, it did not disappear. It mutated. This is why today's crisis feels unfinished. Because Venezuela is not just changing leaders, it is trapped between two eras. And in that space, instability thrives. The first rupture came fast, and it came violently. U.S. Special Forces entered Caracas. Security lines were breached. Nicolás Maduro was arrested. For many Venezuelans, it felt unreal. For others, it felt overdue. This was not a negotiation. It was a shock. In one weekend, a man who had ruled through fear was removed through force. But here's the deeper meaning of that moment. The intervention did not dismantle the system. It only removed the figure at the top. Institutions remained, command chains survived. All loyalty stayed intact. History tells us this matters. When power collapses faster than structures, something unstable fills the gap. Celebration turns into uncertainty. Hope turns into anxiety. If you are watching this and thinking, at least the dictator is gone, pause for a moment. Because the hardest phase of political change always begins after the cameras leave. And Venezuela was about to enter it. To see why this crisis did not resolve anything, we need to examine what stayed hidden beneath the surface. What remained after Maduro fell was not chaos. It was continuity. This is the part most people miss. Power is not a person. It is a system. The same ministries kept operating. The same security chiefs stayed in place. The same bureaucratic reflexes survived. Delcy Rodriguez did not emerge by accident. She emerged because systems favor familiarity, especially in moments of shock. When institutions are captured, they defend themselves. They choose insiders. They choose predictability. They choose control over change. This is how transitional moments are hijacked. Not through coups, but through procedures. Paperwork replaces protest. Oaths replace votes. Order replaces legitimacy. To the outside world, it looks stable. Inside the country, it feels frozen. This is why revolutions fail quietly. Not because people give up, but because systems outlast them. And once that mechanism locks in, reversing it becomes far harder than toppling a leader. Venezuela was now facing that reality, and it was about to be tested again. The second rupture did not come from the streets. It came from hesitation. The military waited, the opposition waited, the country held its breath. This was the moment when momentum mattered most. History shows this clearly. Revolutions do not fail because people resist change. They fail because no one moves fast enough to claim it. The interim government spoke of order, of continuity, of calm. But calm can be deceptive because while nothing seemed to change, power was consolidating again. Decisions were delayed, appointments were postponed, uncertainty spread quietly. Inside the armed forces, loyalty became a question, not of ideology, but of survival. Who would protect them tomorrow? Who would prosecute them next year? In moments like this, institutions retreat inward. They choose safety over transformation, silence over risk. This was the second crisis. Less dramatic than the arrest, more dangerous because when windows close, they rarely reopen. And Venezuela's window was already narrowing. To understand what this meant for ordinary people, we need to step away from power and look at daily life. For most Venezuelans, this is not about ideology. It is about exhaustion. If you are living there, you are not debating legitimacy. You are counting days, counting money, counting options. You wake up not asking who won. You ask who is in charge today and whether that will change tomorrow. Uncertainty is not abstract. It shapes every decision. Do you keep your job? Do you leave the country? Do you trust the future at all? When power is unclear, people pause their lives. Businesses stop investing. Families delay plans. Young people look outward, not forward. This is the real cost of unfinished transitions. Not chaos, but paralysis. You feel it in the silence, in the waiting, in the sense that history is happening somewhere else without you. If this story feels distant, it shouldn't, because instability does not stay contained. If you care about how political uncertainty quietly reshapes ordinary lives, stay with me. This is where the consequences spread outward, because Venezuela's crisis does not stop at its borders. What happens inside Venezuela never stays inside Venezuela. Instability travels through markets, through migration, through geopolitics. When a country with vast oil reserves becomes uncertain, energy markets react, prices adjust, allies recalibrate. Neighbors feel it first, refugee flows increase, borders tighten, social systems strain. Then comes the diplomatic ripple. Governments are forced to choose, recognize legitimacy, or recognize control. That choice reshapes alliances. It signals what the world truly values: votes or order. For the United States, this is the deeper test. Removing a dictator sends a message. What follows sends a louder one. If democratic mandates can be sidelined for stability, others will notice. In Latin America, in Eastern Europe, in Asia, precedents matter. They travel faster than troops. Venezuela has become a case study, not of collapse, but of contradiction. And the world is watching closely, because the answer given here will echo far beyond Caracas. To see where this leads, we have to look ahead and imagine what comes next. The future of Venezuela now breaks into three possible paths. None of them are clean. All of them are plausible. The first is restoration. The opposition regains momentum. Institutions are rebalanced. The electoral mandate is honored. This path requires courage. From the military, from civil servants, from foreign powers willing to accept short-term instability for long-term legitimacy. It is the best outcome and the hardest. The second path is managed stagnation. The interim government remains. Old structures stay intact. Reforms are promised, then delayed. Life becomes predictable but smaller. Less repression, less hope. A country paused, not rebuilt. Many nations survive this way. Few thrive. The third path is regression. Power re-centralizes. Opposition fracture. The system hardens again. This does not require violence, only fatigue and time. History tells us something important here. Systems do not choose the best future. They drift toward the easiest one, unless something intervenes. And that brings us to the final question, not about Venezuela, but about all of us. What do we do when democracy wins the vote, but loses the moment? Democracy is not a moment, it is a process. Venezuela reminds us of that brutally. Removing a dictator feels decisive. It looks like progress, but without legitimacy, power corrodes again. María Corina Machado is right about one thing. Mandates matter, votes matter, but history is unforgiving. Good intentions do not govern countries. Systems do. This is the lesson many refuse to learn. Democracy cannot be outsourced. It cannot be imposed, and it cannot survive on symbolism alone. If the world wants Venezuela to recover, it must stop confusing stability with justice and speed with success. Because every shortcut taken today becomes a precedent tomorrow. If this story made you uncomfortable, that's the point. Share it, question it, and keep watching. Because Venezuela is not the end of this story. It is the beginning of the next one.